Welcome to the Arkansas Food Farms and Forests podcast, the podcast bringing you the latest on food, fiber, and forestry research from the Arkansas Agricultural Experiment Station, the research arm of the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture.
Welcome to Food, Farms, and Forests. I'm Jennifer Fouch. Today we are going to the University of Arkansas at Monticello to learn about several projects going on there, more specifically at the College of Forestry, Agriculture, and Natural Resources. We are discussing the project Restoring Bottomland Hardwood Forests, which is part of a nationwide Climate Smart program made possible by a $3.7 million grant from the United States Department of Agriculture. Joining us to discuss these topics is Dr. Michael Blazier. Dr. Blazier, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, happy to be here.
So Dr. Blazier is the Dean of the College of Forestry, Agriculture, and Natural Resources. He also serves as the Director of the Arkansas Forest Resources Center. He is the Advisory Board Chair for the Restoring Bottomland Hardwood Forest Project, which is being led by Dr. Nana Tian. Dr. Blazier, can you start by telling us more about this project? It's part of a much bigger nationwide initiative, the Climate Smart program.
This one's one that's been exciting from the chair I sit in for a lot of standpoints, because one, it's one of the largest grants that's ever been gained by our unit. It's a $3.7 million 5-year project that's funded through the NRCS. And what's really exciting about that to me is the team that Dr. Tian brought together really brings together and leverages expertise and ongoing work that's been going on within the Division of Agriculture. And so her team is herself, so she's got an economics and policy background. Dr. Matt Pelkey, who's our senior economist within the unit. Doug Osborne, who is our waterfowl expert. Katie Dick, who is our agronomist and a fairly new scientist. At the beginning, our extension forester, Cal Cunningham, was a part of that project team. And last year, he moved over to the Arkansas Department of Agriculture to become state forester, but his successor, Jacob Hackman, will slide into that spot from an extension outreach standpoint. So we've got a broad team of expertise all within the Division of Agriculture. We have also got partners with Texas A&M University and University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, and I've really got to stress that one. UAPB is integral to the execution of the project because it's really focused on helping underserved landowners throughout the Arkansas landscape, particularly in the alluvial regions. Another part of the Division of Agriculture that is being leveraged for this is one of the project sites will be at the Pine Tree Research Station, kind of a large-scale demonstration research site that can live past the life of this grant-funded project and serve as a model of how to restore idle farmland or pasture land into bottomland hardwood ecosystems. Back in the early 20th century, when we look across the Mississippi alluvial valley, which is the regions of particularly Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi that are heavily influenced by the Mississippi River, a lot of that land was cleared at the turn of the 20th century for agriculture. And 70% of those native mixed bottomland hardwood forests were lost in that process. And two things happened starting back in the mid-1980s. It was recognized that farming practices were getting ever more efficient and more yield can be produced on smaller per acre. So some of those suboptimal farmlands that never really did well at farming were getting kind of idle. They didn't pay out in terms of the inputs necessary to get good crop yields out of them. And secondly, it was recognized that there were a lot of lost ecosystem service benefits, the water quality, wildlife habitat in particular, when we lost that vast amount of acreage of bottomland hardwoods to those early 20th century farming practices. So starting with the 1984 Farm Bill, there were monies worked into that bill and every farm bill since then to provide cost share funding for landowners in the alluvial areas to take their their less optimal farmland and plant it into the native complex of hardwoods that would have been here prior to all that massive clearing for agriculture. So that's been proceeding pretty well. But one of the things that the project team recognized is that sometimes those smaller landowners that have shallower pockets, they, even with those cost share monies that are available, it's harder for them to get an in on that. And then when we look at the minority communities, they've had such vast cultural stress and strain that was another barrier to benefit from some of those programs. So with this climate smart agriculture funding, like as you mentioned, it's a national effort. They were funding projects that would enhance carbon sequestration, which is tying up carbon from the atmosphere in biomass of some sort, reducing greenhouse gas emission. That's another facet of the carbon cycle. Every plant conducts photosynthesis where it's sucking CO2 in and making plant biomass, but it's also those plants are also emitting carbon dioxide through respiration, and so is the soil they grow in through the microbial decomposition of organic matter. This project was funded because its climate smart ag practices is taking idle land that's just sort of out there holding the world together, not growing anything all that well because it's unmanaged, and converting it into its native ecosystem, which is bottomland hardwood trees that are going to grow for decades and decades. And then if they are harvested, they'll be made into furniture and homes and structures that will last for decades even further. So that's a practice. We call that afforestation. That's putting a forest where there previously was not one. And that's one of the most impactful things we can do to put something out there that's going to absorb a lot of carbon from the atmosphere and contain it above and below ground and in the eventual structures that could be made from that woody biomass for a long time to come.
So two big takeaways or two big benefits from this restoration project is benefiting landowners, especially smaller landowners, to do something with this land that, as you mentioned, is just sitting there idle. It's not really doing anything for them. And then the environmental impacts, and then also the long-term impacts, as you said, in the future, maybe it can be turned into furniture, be turned into something.
That's correct. And the project team's engaged in a lot of different fronts in making this happen. Our partners with the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff are integral to this. They have a program called Keep It in the Family, which focuses on building a network of minority landowners through Arkansas and providing them with that extra assistance to help them become, have better access to some of these programs and land management practices that can improve the profitability and quality of the land they own. And it's through their network of landowners that they've been building for several years that the project team is reaching out to become potential participants in this project. And this is another thing I think that's really exciting about the project is that this isn't just a research trial. This is an operational scale program. So when all is said and done, there should be about 600 new acres of bottomland hardwood forest in Arkansas that themselves will be showpieces to bring other landowners in to show them what was done to restore that suboptimal land management. The project focuses on equal parts research and outreach. The extension programming team will be hosting field tours on them, converting the data that's gained from all the survival and growth and carbon sequestration metrics that they're measuring and turning that into extension bulletins.
And what does it take for a landowner to be a participant in this project? What are the requirements? and what are some incentives for them? Because if I'm a landowner, could I just say, oh, leave it alone? I don't want to mess with it. It sounds like a lot of work. Can you explain that part of it, the requirements, and then kind of the incentive for them?
What the project team needs are landowners that first and foremost have a clear title to their land. We need to know that they have a legal right to be able to make those decisions on the property. Secondly, looking for landowners that have somewhere between 20 to 80 acres of land. Whether that's contiguous or not doesn't matter, but 20 acres is about the minimum level we could do. And then the 80 to 100 acre maximum is it was set by the project team because I feel like that land ownership range are the landowners that could benefit handsomely from having their land converted back into forest, but also are smaller in scale to the point that they would have a harder time getting in on some of the traditional cost share programs that are available. And then the third and final thing, sign a land access agreement with the Division of Agriculture, allowing the project team and the contractors who are going to conduct the work to enter the property, to plant, to do all the pre-planting operations, and allowing the project team to come in afterward to make those occasional measurements to see how well things are going, and maybe even have to recalibrate in a subsequent year to do some things like supplemental planting. Like if they didn't get quite enough survival that they were aiming for, they can still go in and continue to restore the land. And what the landowner gains from this is 100% of the expenses of the operation are covered by the grant. All their pre-planting operations, the labor and seedlings involved with the planting, and anything that needs to be done post-planting to make sure those seedlings survive and grow well for over a 7-year period. This is the window the project team's looking at. It's a 5-year project, but they're asking for 7 years of access just in case there's any kind of hiccups on the front end. Like I mentioned, if something came in, like say deer got really aggressive and ate too many seedlings or something, they can go back in and replant and make sure that as that contract or as that land access agreement ends, those landowners are left with a really good forest. At the end of that period, everything is theirs free and clear.
Can you explain a little bit more of the different types of research that are going into this? There's several people on the project team, and each of them have a different focus because it takes a lot to make this happen. And we want to measure the data. We want to see how things are going and how they're progressing. Can you talk about the research that goes on behind the scenes for this project?
Certainly. Starting with Dr. Tien, who's the leader of the project. She's got a lot on her plate managing this monstrosity of a project. Her biggest part of the project will be interacting with landowners, doing some survey work with them to understand what were barriers to them getting into to be able to get their land planted in forests. And she's also going to be doing a lot of quantification of like the economic benefits of these conversions. Dr. Pelkey is going to be a close collaborator with her in that component of the project of looking at, extrapolating how these forests that they're planting are developing and how they should develop and what kind of economic benefits, both traditional products and non-traditional things like say carbon trading or something like that. Those are the kind of things that they're working together on. I know Dr. Pelkey's also looking at data from existing bottomland hardwood forests that have been planted for decades on conservation easements and looking at their biomass accrual rates so they can help inform the new sites that they're planning for this project and kind of predict in the future how they're going to grow and how much carbon they'll sequester. Dr. Dick she's our agronomist, and she's actually going to be quantifying greenhouse gas emissions and how they change emitted from soil with these land changes. So she's looking at the farmland pre and post after the conversion and looking at mature forests to see how the nitrous oxide, CO2, and methane emissions are altered and ideally reduced by converting into forest land. And Dr. Osborne is going to be doing some work looking at how waterfowl utilize these new forests as well as the existing forests. And it's interesting to me because it integrates a lot of different things of the Arkansas landscape. And to have a healthy waterfowl population, we have to have a mixture of hardwood forests for nesting, for foraging, for acres, and a lot of agricultural land. They really benefit a lot from the abundant rice we have in our landscape, and that's why Arkansas is fifth in the world in terms of the quantity of ducks that occupy the flyway.
When can we expect those updates? You mentioned the field site visits. Is planning going on right now? Is that going on next year? Where are we on the project?
The rubber is really hitting the road this year, this fall in particular. They're getting the first trees in the ground. They'll have about 40 acres planted over the next few months. I know at Pine Tree, all the preliminary work has been done. One of the other longer term project sites that will be part of this effort past the life of the grant is being planted at the Five Oaks Lodge in the Stuttgart area. We in this unit have a pretty close relationship with the Five Oaks Lodge. We have a formal private-public partnership with them that provides recurring assets for our programs. And being able to plant 20 acres of this project on their site is yet another one of those great things that they've contributed. I know at least 2 private landowner sites they're aiming for planting this winter as well. So in forestry, we plant during the winter time. Fall is about as early as we can plant, and we can only do that if we've got seedlings that have a vermiculite plug around those seedlings. But a lot of what we plant are just what we call bare root seedlings. They're produced in nurseries and lifted about December to January. And January, February is really the high time for planting trees. We put them in the ground when they're dormant. That way they can get established and bloom out with everything else in the spring.
So we'll have to check back in with you sometime next year, here in a few months, to see how things are going. And then on the research side of it too, what does it mean for you in your position? You said you have been in this position as dean there for 4 years, to be a part of such a big project.
I tell people a lot, my job as administrator of a unit like this is to be surrounded by brilliant people and give them all the help they can get to get their job done. This couldn't have happened without the teamwork involved and the mixture of unique disciplines that Dr. Tien pulled together. And it couldn't have happened without the fact that we were already engaged heavily for a long time doing this kind of work. We have a really robust background in doing research devoted to the reestablishment of bottomland hardwood forest. A lot of that's a consequence of where we sit. Monticello is right here at the intersection between coastal plains, so you can practically go on the west side of town and you've got pine trees. You go to east side of town, you're in the Arkansas Delta. So we really are poised geographically well to be engaged heavily in research on restoring and enhancing bottomland hardwood forests. And Dr. Osborne has really built his waterfowl program up to be nationally recognized. And our partnership we already had going with Five Oaks was certainly something else that was a strength that was leveraged by the project team to allow this to happen. You mentioned we got word on this project being funded. I think that email came into Dr. Tien and she forwarded it over me. It was like midnight or something at the end of 2022. And, I jumped up and kind of rubbed my eyes like, wait, let me make sure I read this correctly. $4 million is coming our way. Wow. And immediately after that, within a day of that, we were informed that the Undersecretary of the Department of Agriculture was going to come visit us that following week to give the congratulatory kind of introduction to being part of this climate smart agriculture funding program.
Is there anything else you'd like to discuss that I didn't ask that you'd like to mention?
Well, I just want to thank you for providing this spotlight on our unit here. I think we've got a lot of great folks doing some really important research. Give you a couple of more examples of the impactful work that some of our folks are doing. Our Dr. Ben Papps is working closely with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, looking at flooding tolerances of different species of bottomland hardwoods. So that's informed their management on the flooding processes for drawing in waterfowl. What can be done sustainably. Just as another, impactful example, our Dr. Don White has been doing black bear research for decades, and Arkansas now has a black bear hunting season that was informed heavily by his work on the genetic diversity and abundance of the black bear populations in the state of Arkansas. So we're percolating in the background on some things that a lot of folks across the state are benefiting from.
Dr. Blazier, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all that knowledge with us, and just a little bit, I'm sure, just the tip of the iceberg of all the work that you and your team are doing. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
That was Dr. Michael Blazier, Dean of the College of Forestry, Agriculture, and Natural Resources at the University of Arkansas at Monticello. Thanks for listening. I'm Jennifer Fouch. Don't forget to subscribe.
The Arkansas Food Farms and Forests podcast is produced by the Arkansas Agricultural Experiment Station, the research arm of the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. Visit aaes.uada.edu for more information.